Have you ever stood in front of a tomato plant with your pruners in one hand, staring at all those leaves and little branches, thinking, if I cut the wrong thing, I'm going to ruin this plant? You are not alone. Tomato pruning feels intimidating because tomato plants do not grow in neat, obvious lines. One stem becomes two. Leaves overlap fruit clusters. A tiny shoot appears in a corner, and before you know it, you are wondering whether it is a sucker, a future tomato-producing branch, or the one part of the plant you definitely should not touch. Today, I want to make this simple. We are going to use a practical, traditional garden approach. Grow a strong plant, keep good airflow, remove what is competing for energy, and avoid cutting simply because someone told you every plant needs to look perfectly bare. By the end of this video, you will know exactly what to remove, what to leave alone, when to prune, how much to prune, and how to avoid the mistakes that make tomatoes stressed, sunburned, or slow to produce. And most importantly, you will have a simple way to look at any tomato plant and know what you are doing before you make a cut. Let's get started. The first thing to understand is that tomato pruning is not about making your plant look clean. It is about helping the plant put its energy where you want it to go. A tomato plant has a limited amount of energy. It pulls water and nutrients from the soil. Its leaves collect sunlight. Then it has to decide how to use that energy. It can use it to grow more stems. It can use it to grow more leaves. It can use it to grow roots. Or it can use it to produce flowers and fruit. When we prune thoughtfully, we are telling the plant, do not spend all your energy making a jungle. Put more of it into strong stems, healthy fruit, and good airflow. That is the basic idea. But before you cut anything, you need to know what kind of tomato you are growing. There are two main types. The first is determinate tomatoes. These are often called bush tomatoes. They grow to a certain size, set much of their fruit in a shorter period, and then slow down. Roma tomatoes, paste tomatoes, and many compact patio varieties fall into this category. The second is indeterminate tomatoes. These are the climbing, continuing types. Cherry tomatoes, beefsteaks, heirlooms, and many slicing tomatoes are indeterminate. They keep growing, flowering, and producing until cold weather, disease, or frost finally stops them. This matters because indeterminate tomatoes usually benefit the most from regular pruning and training. They can become enormous if left alone. Determinate tomatoes should usually be pruned more lightly. If you remove too many branches from a determinate plant, you may accidentally remove future fruit production. So here is an easy rule. If you are growing an indeterminate tomato up a stake, string, trellis, or cattle panel, you can prune more actively. If you are growing a compact bush tomato in a cage and want a big harvest over a shorter period, prune gently. Remove damaged leaves, leaves touching the soil, and only the most crowded interior growth. Now let's talk about the one word that confuses almost everybody, suckers. A tomato sucker is a new side shoot that grows in the angle between the main stem and a leaf branch. Imagine you have the main vertical stem going upward, then a large leaf branch comes out to the side. Where those two meet, there is a little elbow or pocket. Gardeners often call that area the crotch of the plant. That is where suckers usually appear. At first, a sucker is tiny. It looks like a little cluster of tomato leaves trying to grow straight upward from that joint. If you leave it alone, it becomes another full stem. It will make leaves, flower clusters, and tomatoes of its own. That is why they can be confusing. A sucker is not useless. It can produce fruit. But if you are training your tomato to one main leader, that sucker is competing with the main stem. It takes water, nutrients, sunlight, and space. Leave enough suckers, and one simple tomato plant turns into a dense mass of stems. The traditional practical approach is not to panic over every tiny green point. It is to decide how you want the plant to grow. For a single-leader tomato, keep one main stem and remove the competing suckers as they appear. For a double-leader tomato, keep the main stem plus one strong sucker, usually low on the plant. Train both stems upward, then remove the other suckers. For a tomato growing freely in a large cage, you may leave more growth, but you still want to remove weak, crowded, diseased, or soil-touching branches. There is no single rule that fits every garden, but there is a simple way to avoid avoid cutting the wrong stem. Always start at the bottom of the plant and work upward. Do not start at the top, where everything is tender, small, and confusing. Start low, where the plant is older and easier to read. Look for the main stem coming from the ground. Trace it upward slowly. You will see three basic things. You will see leaf branches. These are usually wide and spreading. They hold the familiar tomato leaves that collect sunlight. You will see flower clusters. These are the small branching structures that hold yellow flowers or developing tomatoes. And you will see suckers. These often appear in the joint between the main stem and a leaf branch and grow upward like a miniature new tomato plant. The important part is this: do not remove something the moment you see it. Pause, trace it, ask yourself, where does this stem begin? Is it growing from the main stem, or is it growing out of the joint between a leaf and the main stem? If it begins in that joint and is forming its own upright growth, it is likely a sucker. If you are unsure, wait a day or two. A tomato plant will not be ruined because you left one tiny sucker for 48 hours. But cutting the main growing tip by accident can set the plant back. This is one of the biggest mistakes gardeners make. They prune in a hurry. Tomatoes reward patience. Now, when should you remove suckers? The easiest time is when they are small, around 1 to 3 inches long. At that size, you can usually pinch them gently between your fingers. Hold the main stem with one hand so you do not twist the plant. Then bend the small sucker sideways with the other hand. If it does not come off easily, do not force it. Use clean snips. This is especially important with larger suckers. When a sucker is thick, pulling it can tear the outer skin of the main stem. That wound takes energy to heal and can become an entry point for disease. So here is the rule. Small suckers can often be pinched. Larger suckers should be clipped. Use sharp, clean pruning shears or small garden snips. Wipe them with rubbing alcohol between plants if you are working through a large garden, especially if you see any disease. Make your cut close to the sucker's base, but do not dig into the main stem. You are not trying to carve the plant. You are simply removing the extra growth cleanly. Now let's talk about lower leaves, because this is another place where people tend to go too far. The leaves at the bottom of the tomato plant are not always bad. In fact, healthy leaves are the plant's solar panels. They collect sunlight and make food for the roots, stems, and fruit. So do not strip your tomato plant bare. The goal is not fewer leaves. The goal is healthier leaves and better airflow. The leaves you should remove first are leaves touching the soil. If a leaf rests on damp soil, gets splashed by rain, or stays wet after watering, it is more likely to pick up fungal disease. Early blight, septoria leaf spot, and other tomato diseases often begin low on the plant because that is where soil splash happens. Remove leaves that are yellowing badly, brown, spotted, rotting, or lying on the ground. Then look at the base of the plant. Ideally, you want a little open space between the soil and the lowest healthy foliage. That allows air to move through and keeps water from sitting against the leaves. But be careful in very hot weather. If you live somewhere with intense summer sun, fruit can get sun scald. That is when tomatoes develop pale, papery, damaged spots because they are suddenly exposed to harsh direct sunlight. So do not remove every leaf around your fruit clusters. Healthy leaves still protect tomatoes from heat. A good balance is to keep enough leaves above and around the fruit for shade, while opening the lower section of the plant for airflow. Think of it like opening a window, not tearing the roof off the house. Now, let's walk through an actual pruning routine you can use every week. Start by bringing a small bucket or container for your clippings. Do not leave diseased tomato leaves scattered around the garden. If the leaves show signs of disease, throw them away in the trash. Only compost them if you know your compost pile gets genuinely hot enough to break down pathogens. First, look at the soil line. Remove any leaf touching the ground. Second, look for yellow, brown, spotted, or damaged leaves. Remove those cleanly. Third, trace your main stem from bottom to top. At every leaf joint, look for a sucker. If you are growing single leader, remove it. If you are growing double leader, choose one strong sucker early in the season and leave it. Then remove the other competing suckers as they form. Fourth, stand back a few steps. Can you see light moving through the center of the plant? Can air move between the stems? Are leaves packed tightly against one another? If the plant is crowded, remove remove only enough interior growth to create space. You do not need to solve everything in one pruning session. Fifth, support the plant. This step is often skipped, but it matters just as much as pruning. A tomato plant that is not supported will bend, snap, sprawl, and develop crowded growth near the ground. Whether you use stakes, cages, strings, trellises, or a cattle panel, keep the plant upright. Tie stems loosely. Use soft garden tape, tomato clips, strips of old t-shirt fabric, or purpose-made plant ties. Do not use thin wire or string that can cut into the stem. As the plant grows, continue guiding the main leader upward. Now let's clear up one more confusing situation. Sometimes the top of an indeterminate tomato plant looks like it splits into two equal stems. One may look like the main leader, while another looks almost identical. This happens because tomatoes have a growth pattern that can be visually confusing. If you cannot clearly identify the leader, do not rush. Look lower on the plant. Find a well-developed flower cluster. Follow the growth above it. Look for the stem that clearly continues the upward direction of the plant. A true leader will continue producing a repeated pattern of leaves, flower clusters, and upward growth. A sucker will usually begin from a leaf joint and may look younger or slightly behind in development. But again, you do not need to be perfect every time. Tomatoes are remarkably forgiving. If you leave a sucker for a week, you can remove it later. If you accidentally keep two leaders, you can simply train both and manage the plant as a double-stem tomato. Gardening is not a test with one correct answer. It is observation. The more often you look at your plants, the easier it becomes. Now, when should you prune during the day? Early morning or late afternoon is best. Avoid heavy pruning in the hottest part of a blazing day. A plant already dealing with heat stress does not need a major haircut at noon. If you are transplanting tomatoes, the same idea applies. Plant in the cool of the morning or toward evening when the sun is gentler. Water deeply after planting, and give the plant time to settle in. For young transplants, you can remove a few lower leaves before planting deeply. Tomatoes can grow roots along buried portions of their stems. Those little hairs and bumps along the stem can develop into roots when covered with moist soil. That extra root system can help the plant take up more water and nutrients, but do not overdo it. Leave several healthy leaf layers above the soil. Young plants still need leaves to power their growth. A strong tomato plant is not one that has been pruned the hardest. It is one that has a healthy balance of roots, leaves, airflow, support, and fruit. Let's talk about common mistakes. Mistake number 1, pruning a determinate tomato like an indeterminate tomato. Remember, determinate tomatoes carry a lot of their future production on the branches you are tempted to remove. Keep pruning light. Mistake number 2, removing too many leaves at once. If your plant is dense, it can be tempting to strip half of it in one afternoon. Do not. Remove a little, then give it a few days. Let the plant adjust. Mistake number 3, pruning wet plants. When leaves are wet from rain, dew, or overhead watering, disease can spread more easily from plant to plant through your hands and tools. Prune when the foliage is dry. Mistake number 4, ignoring support. Even a perfectly pruned plant will become messy if it is allowed to fall over. Support and pruning work together. Mistake number 5, thinking every sucker is an emergency. A tiny sucker is not a disaster. The best gardeners are not frantic gardeners. They observe, make a simple decision, and take a clean action. And finally, mistake number 6, forgetting to harvest. Regular harvesting encourages many tomato varieties to keep producing. Pick ripe fruit often. Do not leave overripe tomatoes hanging on the plant longer than necessary. So here is the entire method in one simple sentence. Start at the bottom, remove diseased or soil-touching leaves, trace the main stem upward, remove only the suckers that do not fit your chosen training system, support the remaining growth, and keep enough healthy foliage to protect the fruit. That is it. You do not need a complicated chart. You do not need to memorize 20 pruning rules. You just need to understand what you are looking at. A leaf branch gathers energy. A flower cluster makes fruit. A sucker becomes an extra stem. Once you can recognize those 3 things, pruning becomes much easier. And after a few weeks of checking your plants, you will start seeing the pattern almost immediately. You will look at a tomato plant and know, that is a leaf. That is a fruit cluster. That is a sucker. That needs to come out. that needs to stay. The best part is that pruning does more than make the plant look tidy. It makes your garden easier to care for. You can see pests sooner. You can spot disease earlier. You can reach ripe fruit without fighting through a wall of leaves. And your tomatoes get better air movement, better support, and more focused growth. So take your time, keep your tools clean, and remember, you are not trying to control every inch of the plant. You are guiding it. That is the traditional garden mindset. Work with the plant, pay attention to what it is telling you, and make small corrections before little problems become big ones. If you found this helpful, take a look at your tomatoes today. Start with just one plant. Trace the main stem. Find one sucker. Remove one leaf touching the soil. Once you see how simple it is, you will never look at tomato pruning the same way again.